Sidewalks picking up the yard, and then they're like, I'm gonna pay you to water the trees, so I'm.
All right, I'm Travis. I'm an alcoholic. Our speaker this morning has been my sponsor for the duration of my sobriety this time. And he got me right into the steps. He knows the steps very well and knows exactly how to tie them into whatever problem that I bring to him. But more than anything else, he just loves Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've learned to stay sober by watching what he does. He's a busy man. He's not at a meeting every day, but when he is, he makes it count. He gets involved with the newcomer, gets to know them, shares his phone number and gets theirs, and tries to get them involved and make them feel welcome. And he has a great story. So please welcome Michael.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael. I'm an alcoholic. I would feel more comfortable if there were like a third of the number of people here than there are. But thanks, Stanley, for asking me to speak. So I got sober April 1st, 2012. I was a sponsor in a home group. I moved here a couple of years ago and met Travis and started working with him around that time. But my sponsor made it pretty easy for me to know what to do when someone asks me to speak at a meeting. Let's just say yes. So that's what I said. I checked the calendar and said yes. That's not like something as small as that is not within me on my own. Like I didn't come up with it, before I got here. If someone had asked me to do anything that was uncomfortable, and this is uncomfortable, I mean, it's good, but like no one's like, well, I hope I get asked, So the normal reaction would have been like spin the story, like come up with either don't respond, come up with I wish I could, but I have something else going on. And man, it's just easier to talk for an hour than it is to like just say yes, talk for an hour, than spend the 3 days of anxiety that I would have spent before. So anyway, yeah, so I got sober, like I said, 2012. I was 19, 32 now. It's great to see other young people in the meeting. I was in a treatment center when I got introduced to AA. I didn't stay sober that time, but that's how I started coming to meetings. And so I grew up was born in Maryland, but grew up in rural Pennsylvania. And I don't think it's worth spending a ton of time talking about, but parents were divorced when I was young. I don't think it had any impact. Like, I was a couple of years old. I don't remember it together. Nothing to do with me being an alcoholic. Mom remarried. That's when we moved to Pennsylvania. Spent most of my time with her, and then occasional time with my dad. I just felt goofy as a kid, basically. I felt awkward. I wondered why. So when I got to AA, I heard people talk about feeling like everyone else had a handbook for life and they didn't get a copy. And I felt that way. Like that made sense to me when people described it. I just didn't know where you were supposed to learn all the things that I thought everyone else knew. It's like they knew how to hang out and have friends and play football and all the other, and I just was like fumbling my way along. So I don't know if that has anything to do with me being an alcoholic, but that's how I felt growing up. Obviously there are people in the room who had different experiences, but I think that what it meant for me was that when I found drinking, there was a problem to be solved, and drinking was like, that fixed all of that. I immediately knew, I just felt in my skin. I just felt like I could like take a breath and settle down. And that was very welcome at 12 years old or however old I was, so who knows? But I don't spend any amount of time thinking about like why I'm an alcoholic. I just know that I am. And so I started drinking and using drugs at like 12 years old. I'll just call it all drinking because that's easier, and that's what I did when I got here. But there was plenty of everything going on at that point. And when I got to AA, I would hear people talk about feeling like they had discovered alcohol when they drank for the first time, and I related to that a lot. It was not another beverage, right? It was like a door to something much better that I had been looking for without even knowing it. And so I just drank as much as I could from the beginning. And for a couple of months that meant weekends, or I don't know what, as often as a 12-year-old can drink. When you have parents that are wrapped up in their own shit, that's often, as it turns out. But yeah, so I drank a lot, and within a year I was drinking daily, 5 days a week. I don't know. I mean, I just found a way to make it work. You can find people to buy you booze, and you can steal from people. And I was game with all of that. I had no issue with any of it. I felt like what I got out of drinking just so far outweighed any of the potential consequences. It was worth the trade. And so, yeah, I drank constantly, and that concerns people periodically when you're in your teens. So I would get in trouble and have to put it down for a while. I think I went to my first AA meeting when I was 15 or 16, probably. I had no interest in being sober. I thought the meetings were lame. I liked the stories in the book a little bit. I thought the meetings were sad, and I was like, I'm not interested in this. So I would go back to drinking as soon as I could. And then, throughout, I think I was here, and someone a couple of weeks ago shared about being drunk in high school, and like getting drunk in the morning on the way to school. I did that. They thought that was the craziest thing. I totally did that. I'd fill up a plastic bottle with whatever I could find and drink on the way to school. That made all the sense in the world to me. Like, school was horrible. Drinking was great. Yeah, let's do it. So I did that. This is like low consequence stuff, but without intervention, like, that guy doesn't go on to do good things. Like, you don't drink on your way to school at 16 and just like, whatever. I got sober because of AA. It was not going to happen on its own. I was interested in drinking more, not less. So, I got through high school kind of without incident, I guess. I have a mom that has mental illness, and she was suicidal on and off as I was growing up. And I've got a brother that's 10 years younger than me. And life at home just sucked. It was not fun. I don't hold any of that against her. We're not able to have a very good relationship now, but it's as good as it can be. And I just remember, I just felt like I was going nuts growing up. I just felt like I was going crazy. And when I was drunk, I didn't feel that way. So that's kind of what high school looked like. I moved away for college. I went so I had gotten in trouble for drinking. My dad traveled for work, and he said, just like travel with me this summer. And so I was like hanging along with him. I was 16 or 17. 17, I guess. And I was just stuck in the car. It was like my punishment, just like get in the passenger seat and go to work. So I was with him, and I knew I was kind of supposed to go to college, but I was a very average student. I never studied. I got, C's and B's, doing no work. And anyway, so we were on a trip, and saw a sign for a college in Rochester, New York. And I said, we should go look at it, because I think I'm supposed to go to college. And so we looked at it, and I was like, yeah, this is good. And I applied, and I got in, and I went there. That was it. And I got in trouble there, and I was caught doing drugs and drinking, and they had this like internal justice system, like this is totally unofficial. Like, I get frustrated now thinking about it. I'm like, I just shouldn't have complied. Like, I should have made him call the cops. Like, those weren't cops. But They tricked me. So I got in trouble with this system, and there was like a hearing, and there was I think I spoke here like a year ago and I told this, but there was a counselor or an advisor of mine who worked in the English department, which I thought was cool. And she shared with us that she had been homeless and had lived in her car. And I thought that was really cool. And I was like, I can trust her. So I said, hey, I got in some trouble, and I called her. And I said, hey, this is what's going on. And she said, it's not a big deal. She's like, you're going to do this hearing, and as long as it doesn't happen again, you're going to be fine. And I was like, oh, like it's going to happen again. Like this is the first year. Like, so a normal person would be like, listen, you've made a mistake. We're all going to forgive you. It's going to be okay. And I just knew that I was going to need more forgiveness than the one time. And so I started looking to transfer schools, because that's what you do. You like move town, new school, you just get a fresh start. So I tried to do that, and I transferred out of the school in Rochester to a school in Florida. I think I had just read The Rum Diaries by Hunter Thompson, and I was like, it's kind of like Puerto Rico, and I don't know, I don't know what I was thinking. I was delusional. So I ended up living above these self-storage units in St. Augustine, Florida, and moved in with two guys off Craigslist, and went to college there. And I felt like it was going to be my fresh start. And at the end of my first semester, I got a letter from the school telling me not to come back, because I hadn't really been going to begin with. I think I had a 1.2 GPA or something. I was shocked. I didn't know. I mean, I thought I was doing okay. It's just not a joke. Like I was delusional. I didn't know what was happening. I couldn't show up to class. I had one course that I knew I was kind of not doing well in, failing. And I remember asking the instructor, like there was a big assignment and I missed the deadline, which is like, those are the wrong words. Like I didn't do the assignment and the deadline passed. It wasn't like I was a day late. And then I asked him, and I was like, I think I made up, I said I said my mom had kidney cancer. I don't know anyone who's had that. I'm sure it is a thing. And that things had been tough and I needed more time. And I don't know if he like bought the story or just didn't care, but he agreed to give me more time. And then I just still didn't do it. I didn't know how to live life, period. Yeah, that's all there is to it. Like, I don't know what happened. I just wanted to drink. Nothing else. I didn't get anything out of anything else. Like I didn't get anything out of doing well in other, maybe because I'd never experienced it. I don't know, but I just wanted to drink. So I failed out. I drank another couple months after that. And then I ended up going to live with I moved back up to Maryland to live on my dad's couch and try and find a treatment center to go to. I was physically addicted to opiates. I was drinking every day. I was smoking weed 7 times a day. So I was down with the idea of I couldn't see my way through it. And I couldn't, I didn't imagine, I just didn't know how things were going to get any better. So I was open to the idea of going to a treatment center, and I did. So I went voluntarily. There was a place in Virginia. It's a 30-day program, and I was there 4 months. I drank 3 months in, so I left there with my 30 days sober, but I had been there for 4 months. That was the drink that getting drunk that time was the one that scared me. I had gone to this place voluntarily. I really took it pretty seriously. I was there for 90 days. They recognized that maybe I should stay a little longer. And so we were going to do 30 days of intensive outpatient. So I was going to live at a halfway house. I got a room in a sober house, and I was going to be at the treatment center from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And the first weekend I had at the halfway house, I got drunk. And it was like watching a movie. I mean, I know, I didn't know what was happening. It was like, I was not even there. It was like autopilot, get the drink. And then I regretted it. And that was I mean, that was proof enough that I just didn't have a say in it. Like I was scared that I was just going to not be able to stop drinking. And so I left that place because it was kind of obvious to me that it wasn't going to be the answer. It helped me get sober for a while, but I drank while I was there. So I moved back in with my dad, and the takeaway I got from being in there was that I should go to meetings. And so I went to meetings. And I'd been living with my dad. He got me a job at a car dealership, washing cars. So I was doing that. And I was going to meetings, and I was living on his couch. And I had done that for 2 or 3 weeks probably. And I was at a meeting, and this guy, Kevin, older guy, came up to me after the meeting. I was in the habit of showing up when it started and leaving when it ended, because I was like, yeah, that's what I'm going to show up early. And he grabbed me. He must have seen that I'd been doing that, and he found me right. I was walking out after the prayer, and he like walked in front of me and introduced himself and wanted to exchange phone numbers, and said that there was a meeting he thought I should check out. I thought the whole thing was really strange. You know, I was like, what is this guy? What's he doing? You know, leave me alone, kind of. What do you want? Like, I thought AA was a cult. It might be, but I later learned that you guys don't actually get anything from, like, you don't like take my money. So it's, if it is, I'm okay with it, I guess. But that was my concern. But he said, call me tomorrow and I'll give you the details about the meeting. And I was like, just tell me, you know. So, but he didn't. So I called him, and it was the strangest thing. He was like, how's your day? And I told him about my day washing cars. And I was like, I don't even know you. What do you care? Anyway, he was taking an interest in my life, which I thought was strange. And he told me about the meeting. It was Sunday night. It was a young people's meeting. It ended up being my home group. I went there. The first night I went there, a group of guys shook my hand, introduced themselves to me, welcomed me. One of them introduced me to a guy named Gordon, who he said I should ask to be my sponsor, and who did become my sponsor. And it was the first experience I had of people in AA. You know, really the credit goes to this guy Kevin, but of people in AA like helping someone who needs it, basically. And I was not the guy that was going to sit in a meeting and take notes and decide who would be the best sponsor and go ask them and ask when we could work the steps. And, you know, that just wasn't going to happen. So, that's how I ended up here. I've been sober since then. And I lived in Maryland for the DC area for 3 years, my first 3 years sober. And I moved out of my dad's place after 5 or 6 months, maybe. You know, it was suggested that I use some of the money that I was making washing cars and pay rent to someone. And so I did that, and I lived with a couple of sober guys. And my first 3 years, I lived in different houses with people in AA, which was a common thing where I got sober, for younger folks. And yeah, I learned a ton out of it. I mean, I just grew up in AA, basically. I didn't have any, you know, I would hear people talk about living a good, decent life, and, you know, in their 30s or 40s, they started drinking a lot, and they had lost some things that they had gained before. And I never had anything. I didn't know how to do anything. And so it wasn't about regaining things that I had once had. It was about like learning how to live life. And, you know, that first year, I just became convinced that if I just became convinced that I was just going to die drunk early if I didn't do something about it, because I had enough experience with not being able to keep a lid on it, basically. And I was in unsafe situations, and I was, using hard drugs, and it was it wasn't going to last long. And so I got into the steps with my sponsor kind of right away. We read the doctor's opinion the first night we met, and I remember him saying, we'll alternate pages and then stop if there's something you want to talk about, or I'll do the same. And he stopped at the bit where it talks about the alcoholic not being able to tell the true from the false. And that, he shared what that meant to him. And I was like, I don't know, poor guy. Like, I don't know what he's talking about, and I was thinking about it on the way over, and I didn't know the true from the false. Like, that's why that passage meant nothing to me. I was like, oh, I don't have that problem, sucks to be him. So we got into that. It was explained to me that an alcoholic, in simple terms, was someone who, when they started drinking, couldn't control the amount that they drank, and when they stopped drinking, they couldn't with any certainty tell you how long they would be stopped. And that was perfect for me. That was all I needed. I had no interest in a drink. Some of my worst nights drinking were when I was limited to a drink or two. I would rather not drink than have a drink or two. And I just couldn't say stopped. When in the periods of time when I would stop drinking because I'd have some good reason, I would not sleep, get pissed off about everything, think that you were all idiots, and I just would get so uncomfortable that I would have to drink again to feel okay. And the book talks about being restless, irritable, discontent, and that doesn't take any time to ramp up when I stop drinking. And so the easiest thing to do was just to drink again. So I related to the definition of being an alcoholic that he shared with me and that the book talks about. We read the second and third step out of the 12 and 12, and read the relevant parts of the big book. My sponsor explained to me that he wasn't sure what his higher power was, that he prayed in the morning and asked for help staying sober, and prayed in the evening and said thank you. And we left it in a general place and moved on to the fourth step. And I remember thinking that was okay by me, for that point. I grew up Catholic, I guess. I grew up Catholic and went to Catholic school until I was like in 5th grade. There was stuff I liked about it, but I just felt like it would be easier if I could believe it, but I couldn't. So it would be nice if I could buy into this stuff, but I just can't. So it wasn't for me. And that's where I would have said I was atheist when I showed up in AA. I was not only convinced that wasn't real, but I was convinced that none of it was. And so that's where we left the second and third step. It's obviously changed a ton for me over the time I've been sober, but that was enough. Really, I was convinced that my sponsor had shared enough about himself with me that I was convinced he was an alcoholic, and he had been sober 6 years. And that was like, okay, like he has the same problem as me. And he had no issue sharing the embarrassing stories about his drinking in a way that gave me full confidence that we had the same problem. And I don't have any issue doing that either. That is, Travis and I met because I was at a meeting and I shared that one of my attempts to get sober looked like me taking handfuls of Benadryl every night to sleep. And he was like, oh yeah, I've done that. So it's like, there's no the credit we get in AA is from the things that we've done, not from how good our lives are now. Like I don't have anything if I can't convince someone that I have the same problem as them and that I've found a way through it. So I don't know where I was going. So we went on to the fourth step, and I was one of the ones where like I would give my sponsor regular updates on how my fourth step was going. And, I worked on it for an hour. I did 2 hours. And he was so pissed. He was like, dude, tell me when it's done. I don't care. If you have a question, let me know. And then tell me when it's done. Like, call me when it's done. Stop telling, I'm not your dad, like you don't have to do this. So it took me, I don't know, 5 or 6 months to do it. It's like, 8 hours of work or something, but that's how long it took. And we set a time to read it. And I went over to his house. We read it in his basement. I read it to him. He shared a couple of things from his with me. I sat for an hour afterwards. And I left 2 things off of my fourth and fifth step, which were, in retrospect, the 2 things that needed to be on it. And so I didn't do one, basically. I did a shell of one. And I didn't feel good after. I felt really bad for days after. And a couple of months later, I had gotten to a point where I was convinced that I was going to have to go drink again if I didn't start feeling better. And I was probably sober 18 months. And I went to a men's retreat, an AA men's retreat. And there was a guy there, I forget his name. He shared what I would consider an overshare during his talk. And it directly related to the stuff I had left off of my fourth step. And so it goes, there's some merit in oversharing sometimes, I guess. But he talked about, it just exactly mirrored what had been going on. He had a friend who knew this stuff and knew that he had left stuff off. And the friend convinced him to tell his sponsor and do an honest fourth and fifth step. And what he was sharing, 15 years of sobriety later, was that he didn't think he would have been able to stay sober if he hadn't done it. And that was how I had already been feeling. And so I called my sponsor and I said, hey, can we set up some time to, I need to talk to you, basically. And he said, yeah, let's meet in my car after the meeting. And we went in his car and I told him the things. And I said, look, I left these off. They should have been on there. And he just said, welcome to AA. And that was it. And man, it was like, that's the stuff that they're talking about in the, fourth and fifth step promises in the book. I just felt like, it was the first time someone had known everything. And he would later say stuff like, if there's a name for it, someone's done it, and, dumb little things like that. But I just realized I didn't have to drink again, I think, is how I really felt at that point. I was like, this is going to be all right. And so we just kept moving through, and read and did a 6th and a 7th, and started to make some amends. And thankfully I was able to get through the steps in the time that we both lived in the same place. And he still sponsors me, but I moved around 3 years sober, and he moved 6 months after that, and we get together periodically. But the 8th and 9th step, first of all, I'm not one of these, like, I don't take AA like a student, so like by the time we got to 8, like I didn't have my 4th and 5th step list anymore. Like I'm not one of these, like, I'm not very thorough about the note taking. So he was like, well, that would have helped with this because you kind of would have had the list already, but go write another one. So I wrote an 8th step list, and started to make amends. And most of my stuff, you know, I lived a pretty, I just tried to live life alone as much as I could. And so there was a lot of like harm to family. I just took advantage of the people that were close to me, basically. That's how I drank. Um, I stole from people. My sponsor described to me that I stole peace of mind in addition to the money and pills and booze that I stole from people, that I had stolen peace of mind, and that there were amends to be made for that. And so we started to go through it. A couple standout experiences. I made amends to my sister, and I had my list of things that I wanted to make amends for. And I read through them, and she said, "Yep." She had her response, and it was great. And she said, "You know what the real problem was that if you weren't having fun, no one could have fun." And that was not on my list. I didn't know that's who I was. But she was right. I mean, she was completely right. If I wasn't happy, everyone else had to be miserable too. And I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that way. Like I am interested in being someone who just does better than that. You know, like I want other people to be fulfilled and happy. And so that was eye opening. I made amends to my dad, and he had borrowed $14,000 from his siblings to send me to treatment. He didn't have any money, and he asked each of his siblings, and 3 of them agreed to lend him a portion of the money. One of them didn't. I felt just disgusted about the whole thing, that I had put him in that situation. And I talked with my sponsor, and he had said, you know, there's parents have an expectation of spending a certain amount of money on their kids. This probably wasn't on the list, and you should pay it back. And so I offered to pay the money. I didn't have it, but we were going to agree on some kind of payment plan, and he just wouldn't hear it, which I understand. And so I talked to my sponsor, and he said, just, you're not off the hook, but he's not going to hear it right now. So just remember that, basically. Don't forget the amount, and something will come up. And just this last year, my dad, because of health reasons, was forced to retire. He still has no money. He was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer a couple of months ago. And my wife and I were able to, we bought a house that he lives in a very low cost of living area. It's like $100 and some $1,000 house. And the closing costs and down payment and everything were like within $50 of the amount of money that I owed him, just without thought. And so that was cool. He was open to that because he needed the help, and that feels great. I mean, that wasn't the plan. I didn't realize that they lined up until I was talking to my sponsor about it, and he said, you know, isn't that? It was. So, that's not like a. Yeah, I'm just fortunate to AA that's something that's possible, and that I just know now how to deal with situations that I didn't. I mean, that's the one of the 9-step promises. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. I was baffled by everything, so the bar was low. But I find that, yeah, after some time sober and working with a sponsor and other people, I'm less confused by life than I was when I got here. People used to ask me in meetings, like, how are you? That's a big question, you know, like my first couple of months sober, like all I had was good or bad or fine, or, you know, I just didn't know what was going on. I was totally confused by life. And through working the steps and practicing the principles, that stuff has started to, I mean, it's really melted away, to be honest. It's not started to, it's been a while. But the first couple times it came up, my sponsor would say things like, well, we do a 10-step inventory. So I would do a written 10-step and write down where I had been resentful, selfish, fearful, and dishonest. He'd say, go write it down and then call me back. And I'd call him back. And it's like, oh, shocker. You know, there's some like basis for what I'm feeling, you know. I've got there's something to be done about it. Anyway, so, you know, 10, 11, and 12, I say the prayers that my sponsor talked about. I say other prayers. I don't know what I believe in. It's just the way it is. I have on and off meditated in a formal way since I've been sober. I've gone to some classes and some retreats and things like that. There are activities that I partake in that I think are meditative, meaning they clear space and allow room for other thoughts and ideas to come into my head. I work with other people. You know, I just, my life is, because of AA, it's like orders of magnitude better than I thought possible. And the credit goes to AA and the people who shook my hand at those first meetings and took an interest in me and called me and bothered me and met up with me and took me through the steps and insisted that I work with other people. And I just don't get any credit for it. Like I'm uncomfortable when like my dad congratulates me on another year of sobriety, for example, right? It's like my feelings on it are just so much bigger than that. Like I'm just lucky. I've done some stuff, but man, it's whatever. So I'm kind of like emotional about AA these days, which is weird. If someone had done that in my first couple of meetings, I would have not listened to them. But I feel really grateful to be sober. And so that's the feeling. The action or the byproduct is that how can you feel that way and not want the same for other people who are where you were 12 years ago? So I really try and make it a point to find people in the room who are where I was when I showed up in AA. Like I try and be Kevin, you know, basically from my first couple of meetings. So, you know, and I do it because I'm grateful, and I also do it because it's just been a super rewarding part of being sober. And it's way more fun watching other people's lives come together and get better than it was, you know, that happening to my own. So that's what I've been trying to do in AA. And so I got married last year and we had a baby in May. And so I'm a new dad. She sleeps great, which is awesome. You're not supposed to tell people because maybe you'll jinx it or something, right? Yeah, knock on wood. But really, I don't have as much time as I used to, and you know, I really like what Travis said. Like if I can only go to a couple meetings a week, like I want to meet up with someone, I want to get a coffee, I want to catch up. You know, I'm in a point where I'm trying to make the most out of the meetings I can go to and stay in touch with people constantly over the phone. Just stay plugged in. But I think that's kind of a reasonable place to end. I could ramble, but yeah, I'm very grateful to be sober. I'm very grateful to be in AA. Stanley, thanks for asking me to speak. And yeah, I just want to say I love this meeting. I like coming here. It's much more fun to listen than it is to speak. So I look forward to coming back. But yeah, that's all I've got. Thanks.